Dave Bolger here, and welcome to this week's Had I Known, a show where we explore the Hamilton College experience. Before we get started this week, I just want to take a moment to address what's been going on in the country over the last week to 10 days, and really for far too long before that. You know, we're faced with, really in my mind, what is an issue of right and wrong. Eradicating systemic racism in this country isn't something we should need to argue about. It is a right and wrong issue. You know, I struggle to find the words. I struggle to find what the right actions are. I struggle to come to terms with an understanding of the privileges I've had in my life as a white man growing up in this country, and what advantages I've had, and realizing now that I have had advantages. And what am I now going to do with those advantages to make a difference? How am I going to raise my children to ensure that these issues stop now and do not continue into their generation and beyond? And these are all issues that we all need to come to grips with. And as I think about this show, I know that the issue of race and diversity on the campus of Hamilton College, or based on my experience in the 90s, lack thereof, is a topic that we must explore on this show. So if any of you listening has thoughts on who I should talk to properly cover that topic, I am all ears. Because we all need to do better. And I know I need to do better, and I want to do better. This week we talked to David Gaynes, class of 1999. Last week's guest, Matt Glassman, made the point that students at Hamilton have almost endless opportunity to do the things they want to do. And this week's guest is the living embodiment of that. David Gaynes, class of 1999, created something from nothing on campus. He literally created a television show. And he then became what I like to call him, the media mogul of the Mohawk Valley. So we have a great conversation with Dave and how he's become a documentary filmmaker. His new film, which we talk about, is a film called A Spirit in Flight. And you'll hear him talk about it, but be sure to check him out at A Spirit in Flight Movie on Facebook. Or you can check him out at dgfilmworks.com, dgfilmworks.com. Turns out Dave and I had a tremendously similar experience in our 4 years. And while we were friendly, we certainly weren't close friends. And it was a great opportunity to connect and really make a new friend through this process, which is not something I expected to do. Hope you enjoyed this conversation. I certainly did. Here's David Gaynes, class of 1999. Nope, sounds good to me.
Okay, cool. Awesome.
How you doing, buddy?
I'm good. I'm really excited about this. It's great to reconnect with you. Facebook only gets you.
I know.
It's like it's one view, and God, who knows who has time for anything anymore. So
it's the 75 to 95% fake view, right?
Right. Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
It's the everything is awesome view.
Yeah. Right. Totally. I'm really curious about this technology, I got to say, because I'm making a film. I've been making a film for a number of years where I only do the interviews with audio, and it had stopped and been on hiatus for many other reasons, not just the quarantine, but I've been thinking about maybe continuing, and it's interesting to me that I might be able to do it over the internet. Like, I didn't think Zoom was necessarily going to be the right technology for it, but I knew there were other things out there. And this is pretty cool, actually. So
has this pandemic altered your work at all?
The work that actually I get paid for, my whole professional career is based on, weird gigs. And I've ended up being like the editor for the band Kool the Gang, which is, believe it or not, still a thing.
That's incredible.
How do I put this? They're a real family operation. I think that's the best way to put it. And a friend and colleague of mine used to be their videographer and editor, and he left the business, and he gave them to me very generously. And they're like a legacy act. They tour. They do lots of private corporate gigs. They do casinos, and interestingly, they don't even really show up for a lot of the gigs. They have mostly sidemen. 3 of the original members are dead.
Hmm.
and the remaining four treat it like a company that they own and manage.
Uh-huh.
Essentially,
Uh-huh.
they don't
Right.
have to play every gig, because especially it's a real advantage that nobody knows who the individual members of Kool and the Gang are, because as long as
It's the
they
brand.
play, if they play "Get Down on It" in Celebration, you're gonna dance.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So it's kind of funny though, and I work directly for the wife of the tenor sax player, who's the chief songwriter essentially throughout the band's history, and they're a totally weird client. And they've really kept me busy the last couple of months because they're now doing virtual concerts. They've done virtual fundraising pleas on Zoom that they are using to help raise money for a lot of the theaters and organizations that are in trouble. So they keep sending me stuff more than I can handle at sometimes, especially with the deadlines, and that's been great to fill in some of the gaps. So it's good. That's kind of filling up my quarantine here.
All right. So the premise of this show is to understand, the Hamilton experience and what impact it had on folks. And I'm curious to get into that with you, given your self-proclaimed strange job or odd job career path.
Yeah.
So, how does David Gaynes end up on College Hill?
How did I end up on College Hill?
Yeah.
My parent, I think it was to be perfectly honest with you, I think it was an extension of my parents' fantasy that I go to an Ivy League school. I was very much I didn't have a whole lot of strong opinions, or didn't think I had strong opinions about what I wanted to do next in my life during high school, and my mom did. I think that's probably the best way of putting it. So they my mom put in front of me a bunch of schools that all look like private liberal arts colleges. I knew nothing about college, and didn't have strong feelings. I think if I had, believe it or not, I might not have ended up at Hamilton. And I've had a whole journey of like, did I really belong there? Because of course, I think on the surface, if you saw me at Hamilton College as you did, it might have looked to the outside world like, oh, he loves this place. He made a TV show about it. He's all over campus. There's like no area that he doesn't want to go into about this place. Like I got real granular with Hamilton, but I don't think I was a great fit in a lot of ways. Not that anybody is either, like that's just how life is. Like you end up going places and doing things and you figure out who you are through that process. But I basically didn't get into Dartmouth, and I did get into Hamilton. So there I was on the Hamilton campus. And only later in my life did I realize like, there's large public universities, and there's film schools, undergraduate film degrees, and there's like all kinds of stuff. But I didn't know I wanted to be a filmmaker, and I barely knew that I wanted to experiment with television at that point. I had only had a kind of like very small experiment, the predecessor of Panorama Life on the Hill, the Hamilton College television show. The predecessor of it was in my high school, like towards the like halfway through my senior year of high school. So it was a bit of a lark, and I still went to Hamilton thinking I was going to be an economist when I grew up. Which I still may want to be. um, I had no exposure to private education at all in my entire life. So it took me, I think, until junior year for me to look around and be like, oh, lots of people here have experience with private education. Like that's why a lot of this stuff doesn't make sense to me because
Yeah.
I don't know if I was like wandering around looking for the lockers like halfway through my freshman year, but something didn't fit.
Uh-huh.
But definitely something was a little bit off, for me, my whole Hamilton experience. And and it's not to throw anybody under the bus here, including myself. I was just I was awkward, a very socially awkward person. And interestingly, this is 10 years of therapy talking, the camera, which was, for all intents and purposes, an extension of my arm while I was in Hamilton. The camera keeps as much distance as it does bring you closer to things.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that's been my experience throughout my entire life, really. I liked, especially in my filmmaking, because I've gone into filmmaking where all my films have to do with very deeply existential themes. For me, they do at least, so I'm often dealing with life and death in my films with the characters that I choose to focus on. And to me, it's been a way of encountering deep feelings in a way that feels safe for me. Because I guess to really give you the context in this, I had a brother who died when I was 11, and
Huh.
it messed me up pretty big time for a long time. And you know, big feelings are kind of hard for me, or were hard for me. But interestingly, I simultaneously had a need to feel them in a way, and the only way that I could actually get close to it was with a camera, by investigating other people's experience. And and finding guides in the world. It's not just about the emotions, it's also about just simply the functional learning that comes with having guides in the world. So because my brother Seth was my older brother, and he died, he was 14 and I was 11, so I lost my older brother, who could have been a great guide to me. And my parents, for all of their good points, were totally numb from the experience, and I really didn't have a whole lot of guidance from them either. And what guidance I did get was a little bit of more their vision of what they wanted for me, which had to do with having achieved something in life. They both came from pretty modest means, and then had money. So I think they, to them, like, you want to pick up a sport, here's a tennis racket. It's like, I wanted to play basketball. So my life was a constant juggling act of like what I wanted to be versus what my parents wanted me to be, and that has fortunately evolved somewhat over the years. But the camera,
They bought into the filmmaker path.
no, not at all. I mean, yes and no, yes and no. They have been supportive to some extent. I mean, I get on the one hand, um, sometimes, some days I get, you want to do it. Other times I get like, what are you doing? Interestingly, when I was probably a month or two into my Hamilton experience freshman year, it was my mom who said, you had so much fun making that television show at Weston High. Why don't you do something similar at Hamilton? So in some ways, my mom has been a real driver.
Mm.
But I think as I began to get more success in it, the whole idea that I really actually wasn't going to be a doctor or a lawyer started to dawn on them, and I think they just got nervous. Um, you know, when I make a film and I really dive into uncomfortable subject matter, I think they're not my target audience, and I think what I make makes them nervous, and it's been hard for them to really embrace what I do.
Well, first of all, I never knew about your brother, and it's amazing, to spend formative years of your lives very close to people and think you know a bit about them and really you know nothing about them, and how much
Well,
that
I
how
kept
much
it.
that how much that shapes the experience you have with people on campus. It's amazing to me because
Yeah.
to hear you say that you struggle to fit in, and then to think back to how I viewed something like you creating Panorama. My view of that was, man, this guy's got balls to go out and create something on that campus. Because look, in many ways I understand what you're talking about, having gone to public school myself and going to class with a lot of these prep school kids was a different sort of experience.
Yeah.
So I would look at someone like you creating something on campus, and man, that guy's really doing something. That's so impressive. So to hear you say you were doing it to shield yourself from people is really fascinating to me.
Yeah, yeah. Well, as my wife has said to me, and it makes perfect sense. She doesn't know where it comes from, but I have loads of unearned confidence.
Oh, that's
And
funny.
maybe that itself is a bit of a defense mechanism too. I
Sure,
mean, if I
sure.
can put myself out there and set myself up for the fall, you can't do it for me. Maybe that's what it is, to some
Interesting.
extent. I don't know. I'll bring it up with my therapist this Friday.
So, all right. So you literally start from nothing and create a television show, which became pretty well known. I know it was a lot of David Gaynes, but you had other people working with you by the end, if I remember.
Yeah, I did. It struggled all 4 years for sure. I mean, it was a startup, and I definitely wasn't ready or prepared for what a startup was going to entail. But interestingly, I mean, I think everyone understood in the Hamilton community. I didn't give myself enough lead to really forgive myself the moments where we stumbled. But I think everybody understand and appreciated, like you're saying, that it was a startup, and whatever it was interesting, if nothing else. That wasn't my experience of it. I was actually in a lot of ways a slave to it over time.
Mm.
And it became my freshman year, it became big very quickly. thanks to Alex Slater, who wrote an article in The Spectator that was a front page full banner headline: Hamilton has a television show, something like that. Alex, who now works very successfully in PR, I might have been his first unpaying client. I mean, I was, blown away in retrospect by how supportive everybody was. Nobody
Mhm.
saw it as a threat. Nobody, it was a curiosity more than anything else. Like, how the hell are you really going to do this? Like, you know, I got a $3,000 grant from Gene Tobin. I went and
Huh.
met with Gene Tobin on the winter porch. You know how you used to have president's
The-
hours on the winter porch? Nobody probably ever went. And I was like, you want to spend an hour with Gene Tobin? Like, forget it. But Gene for me was Gene was a great inspiration to me. He was tremendously supportive of the idea. I remember from early on, Gene like just knowing my name, as a student, and thinking that that really mattered. Even when I got admissions material from Hamilton, it was always addressed in my name, not dear applicant, not dear anything. And I always just thought that that meant a lot to me.
Mm.
Even though I wasn't special, I hadn't been recruited. I didn't, like it just, I got that feeling that the Hamilton community was a real thing, and it really is, and it never let me down, and still hasn't. It is a real thing. I think they own that. And Gene really owned it too. And so Gene had these winter porch hours that I always kept reading about in the Daily Bull, like, go meet with President Gene Tobin. I thought, all right, what do I have to lose? So I went and I had a conversation with Gene Tobin. He said, all right, well, I have a special fund for new ideas and things like this. He goes, put together a budget for what you think you need. Like, you need a camera. I think I might have been borrowing camera equipment from Ella Gant in the art department. She is still a fine artist, and so that's what's interesting to me is like, to me, a camera was a camera was a camera. But I saw the stuff that Ella was doing with her students, and it's like, oh, this is really weird downtown New York art, stuff. Like, this isn't what I was thinking. I
Mm.
was thinking more along the lines of maybe a little bit of journalism, maybe a little bit of I don't know, what were my influences in high school? Maury Povich, everybody from Maury Povich to Arnold Diaz was like, that was what I had going on in my head. It was a very wide and eclectic, different type of inspiration. So I needed a camera, and Ella was very supportive. Whatever you need. I edited in the basement of McEwen, which is where the art department had 3 edit bays. That was my first editing space. And then eventually, with a little bit of budget, we bought a camera, we bought some editing stuff. I have to say, the audio visual department at Hamilton was tremendously supportive too. They didn't really know what to do with me. They were an audio visual department that did everything AV, from like fixing overhead projectors to bringing out their own cameras and documenting every graduation and major moments. And so, like, I was, I had something to do with all these things, but nothing to do exactly with any of them. And I had my own vision, and I probably, in retrospect, could have opened up a little bit and asked for more help, and I think I would have received it.
Mm.
But ultimately, I did get, I had a camera, I had tapes, and I had, a two, a 2 cassette editing bay that could give me accurate cuts only editing, and a little office on the third floor. She was an unused office in the Spectator office on the third floor of Bristol. So
I remember that.
yeah, so I had a space as well, and it just really grew. You know, I'm not a good human resources person. That became apparent really early on. So as many people were interested in it, and I brought on, we lost people too. Because I couldn't manage. That was a whole other job. Like, I really wanted to be, I don't know. I had a bit of an attention thing, and I still clearly do, obviously. But like, I was, it was a foregone conclusion that I was going to host the show. You know what I mean? And in retrospect, like, if I could have checked a little bit more of my ego at the door, I think many more opportunities could have been opened up for it, for its longevity. I think it never really looked on the surface like it was anything more than an extension of my idea, and it's, I just, so to that extent, it was a little bit precious.
I was always curious if what would happen post graduation, because I mean, it was that
Crumbled,
you,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, but you were, David Gaynes. Oh, the TV guy.
Yes.
You were the
Yeah.
TV show
Yeah.
guy. Can I tell you my favorite panorama story?
Please.
So it was junior year. I was an RA in Dunham. I got a knock on the door Friday night. Bolger, we want to put a beach in our room and have a beach party. I was like,
Oh God, I know where this is going.
give me a break. Give me a break. So they went out. There was a 2-room double in Dunham. 2 of my advisees
I
went
can't
out.
believe, not to interrupt you, I cannot believe
Yeah.
they actually asked your permission.
It's the kind of respect I demanded as an RA.
That's great.
Okay?
Wow, it says a lot about you as an RA, but go on.
They fill it up. They went to JK Lumber and got I mean, it was a number in the thousands of pounds of sand. I mean, it was ankle deep sand.
Yeah, oh yeah, I remember the pictures.
Well, someone on your crew was there because this is where the story's going. So,
yeah, it wasn't me.
So I had to leave. So I played rugby. People know I played rugby. Saturday morning we get up and it's just ridiculous. Tiki torches. They had a kiddie pool. We're gonna have a beach party. I was like, look, first of all, this is amazing, but if this gets out, I'm gonna get in trouble. So keep it low key. Yeah, Bulger, no problem. We're gonna keep it low key. So we had an away rugby game I left that morning, Saturday morning. I come back late Saturday night. You can't see down the hallway of Dunham outside of the room from the dust of the sand.
Oh my God.
The carpet, and who decided to put carpet in the hallway of Dunham, I'll never know. The carpet in front of the room is black.
Oh God.
And then the next day I get, or whatever it was, whenever you aired, there's a segment of there's your panorama reporter standing ankle deep in sand in the room doing a segment from the party. I said, you call this low key? You had the campus TV show film?
That's incredible. It wasn't me. It had to have been, that might have been Colin Carmen, who was a year behind us. He was a 2000.
Yep.
He blew me away. He always did really great stories. In a lot of ways, Panorama evolved to be something like The Daily Show. We wanted it to be The Daily Show. We wanted it to be news plus humor. But also sometimes we did really serious episodes. So it was everything all over the map.
You create this show. People are talking about it, filming beach parties against RA's wishes in there.
Got Dave Weaver doing sports every week. I mean, you had lots of people who had, who had real ambition of their own to work in media. It was like a venue for them, which was really, I'm very proud of in retrospect.
Yeah. And, I've always held resentment that I was never invited to participate in it.
You would have been invited. You just didn't have time to send out invites. Yeah, you had to show up. I mean, really, it was like,
you were building your own little media empire. I was trying to do my thing on radio. I thought I'd make the crossover into TV, but I never got the call. I never got the call, man.
You had to make the call yourself, I think. I mean, that's the thing that's really funny about it is like it was a real oddity, and it always was. If it looked established, let me tell you, that was just a great snow job that I pulled on everybody. I mean, I was thinking about doing this and like what's the weirdest memory I have of Panorama Life on the Hill? And I have to say, I still have bad dreams about this. It was rolling the AV cart from a storage closet in Beinecke over to the mail center in Beinecke to plug in the show and have anybody see it, because it meant so much to me that it premiere at noon on Thursdays or whatever time it was.
Mm-hmm.
And it wouldn't have made a lick of difference if I missed a week. Of course not, but to me that, so by Thursday morning I had a VHS, and sometimes I stayed up all night and I had my master tape. And here's how people got to see it, Dave. I don't know if you remember this, but it was on a television with a VCR in the mail center. And to make that happen, I was given a special key to open up a certain closet adjacent to the Phileas Events Barn. And what a weird contraption the Beinecke Student Activity Center is, right? Can you imagine wheeling a cathode ray tube television with a VCR, a giant old AV cart, to put the TV where we wanted it? We had to like run a cable. I don't even know how they let us do this. We had to run a cable, I think, across the floor. People were constantly tripping on the cable and unplugging the thing. And so not only had I gone through all this work to show the film and program it to set it up on the loop, but it would constantly get unplugged. And so I was like a nervous wreck all Thursday into Friday. I would be like constantly going to the Beinecke Student Activities Village. constantly replugging in the AV cart and reprogramming the dumb show to play over again. I mean, honestly, it makes my heart grow a few inches to know that it was all worth it. That people actually, because I had no idea even at the time if anybody was watching it. I really
Right.
didn't. It took a while to recognize that people saw it and didn't judge it for being so weird and amateurish. And actually had a spot of generosity in their heart for it, which is like so meaningful to me because I did sacrifice a lot for it, and of
Yeah.
course I made those sacrifices for myself as much as I did for the community. More so, it was my thing, and I'm even a little bit embarrassed about the fact that it was so my thing that that it struggled to grow and ultimately failed to sustain after I left.
Yeah.
But the sacrifices were real. I didn't even consider DC semester, which I would have loved, or study abroad, which I didn't even consider. I'm sure I would have loved it, but I didn't even consider it because to me this thing was so precious, I couldn't leave it.
So you didn't study abroad, but you, in many ways, did. You studied in Utica,
Yes.
while turning your experience into an actual gig as a reporter on, what was it?
Yeah.
K was
Uh,
W
KTV, WKTV.
WKTV in Utica. So,
Yeah, I was
I
a
mean, that
yeah.
was incredible. You turn on the Utica news, and there's our classmate David Gaynes reporting live from probably from a fire in Utica, because I think that's all that's ever
Fires.
on the news in Utica.
Oh my God, I still smell the smoke. Yeah, I've covered a lot of house fires in Utica. My
How did that
proudest
happen?
moment. Okay, so I did an internship between my sophomore and junior year in New York, as at CBS News, and it was a great experience. And I had grown up watching news. I was a news junkie. I love news, and so much of what I was doing with Panorama was informed by news and journalism. So. It felt like the next logical step, I guess, like in terms of thinking about what I might want to do professionally. Um, I wanted to work in news, and so I had this internship, and I came back onto the Hill junior year, and I thought. I guess I've always been really job oriented to some extent. Like that probably comes from my parents. I mean, my dad was a super hard worker. My dad was a physician. He came from very, very little money, and he impressed upon me, like I think the virtues of hard work. So I think by junior year already, like thinking really hard about jobs, and also my own passion, marrying the two. Like I was never going to make a compromise. I wanted to do what I love. And so, I grew up on New York news as you did. So I'm not saying it's the best for sure. As I did work professionally in local television news, I've seen better and more responsive. But New York news, local news is big. I mean, you can say
Hmm.
that about it. It's big.
Hmm.
They cover um, all five boroughs plus all the suburbs. It's a behemoth, and the personalities are outsized. Chuck Scarborough, Sue Simmons, all that stuff.
Yep. Yep.
I was a junkie growing up, so I like the idea of local news. Something appealed to me about it, and certainly it felt accessible. And it felt like it was community. It was responsive in a community sort of way. That stuff was starting to be really important to me. I think things that I picked up at Hamilton about where our world was, and and what a community really was, and how you could be part of a community and do good for a community. And journalism felt actually a little bit like I could be an activist within the system. So I went out and I got an internship. After my whole CBS News experience. I realized how not hard it was to get an internship in media if you really knew what you were doing. It was interesting. Like on the surface, it seemed like it was really hard, after my summer at CBS News, I learned that it's really not. They just need warm bodies. So where I went first was to WUTR, where everybody had been talking about this guy Rocco Vertuccio for years, and I had seen him myself. It's just like, oh my God, this is an oddity. So I can't remember how I got it, but I guess I just drove up and I said, "Do you guys need an intern?" I might have gone up on a weekend, and like it was Rocco alone. He shot the show himself during the day. He came back. He produced the entire show himself. He cut the things that he reported on during the day.
And you're like, I know how to do that. That's what I do.
Yeah, well, I did I did and I didn't. I mean, they were using more sophisticated equipment for sure. I mean, sophisticated. They were 10 years behind the rest of the country, but to me, it was pretty sophisticated. They were shooting on Betacam, which was the format of the day at that time, and Rocco was putting together the whole show himself. So to me, it was interesting to be like, oh, this is even though we all made fun of WTR, this is what I'm doing at a higher level. He's doing it all himself. So I think I might have just gone up and be like, you want an intern? And he's like, sure. It could totally use somebody to carry the tripod. So I shadowed Rocco Bertuccio and worked with him, I think basically every Saturday for most of my junior year. And then at the end of my junior year, I don't know, a bunch of little things had happened at WTR that made me really understand how bush league the place was. And that it was not necessary. It wasn't going to be a place where I was going to grow. And I had run into the crews at Channel 2 at every event on a Saturday, and just like the reporter was just a reporter, and they had a photographer, and the photographer and I became really good friends. And I met him on the weekends, and he lived in Clinton, and we became friends. And he said, I know you. I watched the show. He watched Panorama. Which is so mind blowing to me that he watched it on, because we would run a tape to cable access. And I think it was just such an oddity. I mean, remember, there's only a few channels, so cable access probably still had, a few eyeballs, for people who were, scanning the dial. And he said, I've watched Panorama. And he goes, I think it's amazing what you're doing. And he said, if you want me to, see if there's something for you here at Channel 2, I can ask around. And I said, that would be amazing. So
that must have been an incredible feeling.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I don't know that I recognized what a major thing it was until later. It was not a perfect place.
Because I got to tell you, I hear you telling your story, and I feel a lot of similarity in some of the experiences I was going through. I did a lot of work for this very radio station, WHCL FM.
Absolutely.
And turned that into a gig my senior year at a commercial station in Utica.
Did you really?
I did weekend overnights at WOUR.
Get out of here! Really?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I was trying to compete with you and to be the media mogul of the Mohawk Valley, but you had me beat.
I wish I had known, and I wish we had. I have to tell you, like, this is all right. I'm not gonna get verklempt here, Dave Bolger, but I do want you to know something. You can broadcast this, you cannot broadcast this. I put you on a very high pedestal of classmate at Hamilton. I wish to this day that we had been better friends. I really do. I always thought of you as just kindness, man. Kindness in a vessel. That's always like, you never presented yourself as any different. And it always, yeah. And I wanted to make sure I worked it in somewhere, because I wish we had been closer. And the amazing thing about staying in touch on Facebook and stuff is that there is always an opportunity to be closer. Like, I love that I'm still connected with classmates, and so more to add to the regret that we weren't closer than the fact that you were owning it on radio, which I didn't even know.
Owning it, I don't know about that. I was playing, Pink Floyd to some drunks in Utica.
That's beautiful.
3 a.m.
They need that. They need that.
Yeah, it was fun. But your example of someone saying they saw you on Panorama, I'll never forget sitting in a staff meeting at WOUR, and Genesee Joe, God bless him, still on the air in Utica.
Wow, really?
Speaking of keeping track people on Facebook, I enjoy following him on. So, Joe,
That's
if you're listening, I love you. He came up to me and he said, You're somebody special, huh? I was like, what are you talking about? He goes, I was out to dinner the other night in Utica, and table next to me, they were talking about sports, and all I kept hearing was, well, Dave Bolger said this, and Dave Bolger said that. They had been listening to our sports show on WHCL, and I was like,
oh, that's funny. Oh, that's
I thought
amazing.
I was listening. I thought I was talking to my roommate in his room, and that's it. I didn't know anyone listened to that stuff.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It just feels good when you realize, like, oh, this actually is like a real thing,
Totally.
And that's why I would look at you on KTV and said, he did it, he made it. He's doing the thing. Look at him.
Yeah. Well, I did, and then I didn't. I got fired. The tragic end of the story that nobody knows, because you all left the Hill and split for better places, and I got stuck there working at WKTV, was that I got fired unceremoniously. Ceremoniously, actually. I went out in a bit of a blaze of glory. I had a very troubled. My first experience at WKTV was my first year. I was a senior in college, and I was part-time, and I had tremendous amounts of resentment to deal with from my coworkers. I mean, period, the end. They were were
Mm-hmm.
all J school
Mm-hmm.
grads who had worked their asses off to get to Utica, New York. And here I was, the news director had gone to Hamilton. He was a bit of an interesting person himself, very interesting
Wow.
person, Vic Vetters. He'd gone to Hamilton. He had nothing but disdain for the institution, interestingly. But he
Hmm.
had a soft spot for me because I had come through the same path as him. And his entire narrative to me was, do you know how many people would kill for this job? Don't go back to Hamilton. I'll make you full time this year. Like you don't need to do your senior year. People would
Wow.
kill for these jobs from J schools. You don't need Hamilton. What do you need from Hamilton? Was what and I just wasn't buying it. I mean, it's like I'm amazed at the integrity of my convictions because it didn't hold any water. It was like I'm going to graduate, and this has been a part of my life. I'm not going to compromise it. And so after Hamilton, I went to them and I said, look, I'm only working 20 hours a week. I'm getting paid 11.50 an hour. This is not going to work. And so they created a position for me, which further rankled I think my union brothers, which was that I could take on this show, this health show, this monthly health show that nobody wanted to do and was a real drain on everybody's ability. And I would do the whole thing as a one-man band, soup to nuts. It was all about cardiac health, and it was funded by the local hospitals. So I wasn't taking anybody's job. It was a sales department thing. I mean, you probably know, it was like
Mm-hmm.
it was being produced by the news department, but it came through sales.
Mm-hmm.
Because the hospitals were paying for it. So
Right.
I continued to be a weekend reporter, and then this like health producer and special projects person during the week, which was amazing because I would bang out the show in like a week, and then I'd have all these other daytime hours and like certainly nothing else to do in Utica other than work on cool stories. So I did special series and I did all kinds of like really amazing stuff. Like it was the best of times and the worst of times. I mean, I loved Utica. I fell in love with Utica. I fell in love with the people. I fell in love with every aspect of life that I had never experienced before, which was um, poverty, crime, economics, the economics of a city like Utica, which are very challenging. I mean, it's not enough to just say that it's a depressed city. There's a lot of reasons why it's depressed, and that's fascinating. So, I would be mingling with the highest and the lowest on a daily basis. I knew all the politicians and I knew the homeless people in Cornhill. It was just an
Mm-hmm.
amazing time.
I would say the large majority of students on campus couldn't tell you the first thing about Utica, right? It's so close and
Yeah,
yet so out of the mind of unless it wasn't until my senior year when I had a job in Utica that I really discovered it. And then a few of the friends that I would spend time with, we would start to explore a little bit more and find these new restaurants and find new things. And it was like there's a whole other world out there, and
it's a
it's
whole other
right in our
world.
backyard. And we know, I mean, it's a fascinating thing to me that there could be a city like that, which has a rich history. We never even tried to figure that out or learn about that as
Right.
students. It's a
Well,
shame.
I wouldn't have if I hadn't been forced into it either.
Same, same.
Yeah, yeah. So but then having been, I just found that there was a lot of, for a curious person, there's a lot to be interested in.
So you're bopping around making interesting stories. Is that where the documentary filmmaker was born?
Totally, yeah, yeah. Documentary filmmaking, I guess for me comes from Hamilton. I have to give credit where credit's due. Scott McDonald taught the one of the few cinema classes. I mean, Austin Briggs in the English department taught an amazing cinema class.
Yeah, I took that class.
You took that class? I
Yeah, it
audited
was
it
great.
because I loved films. I always loved films, so I just went and I saw as much as I could of what he was showing. He was always very welcoming. But Scott McDonald taught a class called Facing Reality, which was all about avant-garde nonfiction media. It was everything from Stan Brakhage, who's like a legendary fine art filmmaker of very abstract work, to Fred Wiseman, who's probably not a household name in the mainstream, but Fred Wiseman is like a real godfather of early nonfiction, very accessible to some extent nonfiction documentary filmmaking. Very important artist in his own right. But Scott was opening us up to incredible films, and I was always a film buff. I never thought I would be a filmmaker. But I loved seeing films, and in high school with a buddy of mine from high school, independent films, and this was of course like the '90s were an incredible era for independent films. So I was always interested in it, and I guess I became pretty disenchanted with local news, having worked at a place and seen how the sausage was made. So I had this opportunity to make little weird documentaries that could actually get on local television news. So that's what I was doing. Until I got fired for being very unprofessional on a telephone line with a Madison County Sheriff's deputy, and that was how my WKTV experience ended.
Well, this just took a turn. Wait, what?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a long story, but basically by the almost at my 2-year anniversary at WKTV, I was I was frustrated for reasons that some of it was because of the TV station and some of it was just me. I think I was just frustrated because I really wanted to be making films. I was not I wouldn't have been conscious to that, but that was what was happening. I really liked reaching artistically for what was possible with nonfiction media, and it wasn't I kept running up against the wall at the TV station because the local TV news is a language, and it's a very specific language, and it was I was going to kill myself if I did it for the rest of my life because at that point I could make an 80-second, 90-second story in my sleep, and to me, like the language that people used and live shots and everything that's part of the stew of what local news is was just old to me, and I just realized like if it's gotten this old this fast, what's it going to be like at the next market, when I move to my medium sized market, and then if I make it to New York, what's it going to be like when I make it to New York, and would I ever make the jump from local to network? Like I had all fantasies laid out in front of me about how I was going to be the next Dan Rather and what it was going to take to get there. But I think something was dawning on me, which was that it wasn't going to happen the way it was happening then. And I was really falling in love with, it had been very important for me to be on camera for so long, but I think I was actually using a camera like the real way for the first time in my life in a really effective way. And the art and craft of camera work and editing were becoming really alive to me. And it was just harder and harder to do what I wanted to do in that context. So I was doing some of it independently on my days off. I made a documentary about people who rode the bus in Utica, where I would just get on the bus at a random bus stop and ride around and just ask people what was going on that day. Like there was one guy, he's sort of my go-to example of like a perfect story. They were all interesting stories and also non-interesting stories at the same time. He's my perfect go-to of like what the show was about. He got on the bus outside of Price Chopper with only 2 or 3 giant shopping bags full of tomato sauce. And I was like, and to me, like the opening question is just like, tell me about the tomato sauce. And he's like, he told me a whole story about how Hunt's is a great brand and it was on sale. And he likes to make a lot of tomato soup. And, like that's all the documentary was people, real people from Utica who were really taking the bus, telling me about where they were going and why. And it was great. I mean,
when I lived in New York City, I used to sit on the subway and just look at the people sitting on the subway and just say, what's that person's story?
Oh, yeah.
What's that person's story? And that's exactly what you're doing. That's fascinating to me.
Yeah. So I was doing stuff like that on the side. I did another thing after I got fired from the TV station where with Tim shot it. I would go get on a road. This was outside of Utica in the country. And I would get on a road that maybe I had been on a handful of times that seemed like it had some significance, maybe because of its name. Like one of them was called Military Road. It runs like west out of Deansboro, and which is not so far from from Clinton, and I'd been on it a few times. I guess maybe just cruising around while I was at Hamilton, and or on stories for WKTV, and I said, well, what if I got on this road and just drove until it stopped, and along the way interviewed whoever I found about what they knew about the road. And it wound up yielding like amazing stuff, amazing stories, very much like rooted in oral history, unreliable history. This is just all anecdotal stuff. But if you drove down these roads, like, and to stay with the example of Military Road, you found people along the road who knew the history of their houses. They knew something of the history of the area, which had to do with it being originally like a well-worn Native American path that went all the way to Oneida Lake. and like really like all kinds of, and a lot of it was rooted in who you found. Like if you wouldn't, I wasn't knocking on doors, I was asking questions of people who were in the front lawn, sawing wood or riding a horse or whatever it was.
Hmm.
I started working for the PBS station in Syracuse. I did one of my first real documentaries was with I think a $7,000 or $8,000 budget, which to me was like incredible. I'd never seen any money at that level before. I of course worked for like 3 or 4 months straight. But I did a short documentary about the race between an auctioneer who was a longtime incumbent state assemblyman and an undertaker for state representative from one of the districts in Madison County, which is like the really rural county between Utica and Syracuse. And that was amazing. It was just like an on the ground political documentary. If I wasn't with one candidate, I was with the other. Um, and that aired on the PBS station in Syracuse and won a bunch of awards. Actually, that was probably my first real springboard into like, wow, I'm doing something of value with this. Because I got fired from the TV station, but I stayed there for another 18 months. That says something about the hold that Utica had on me and Hamilton too. I was
Yeah.
really comfortable in my apartment in Clinton, and I was really comfortable being way out of the spotlight, having a lot of space to figure out what the hell I wanted from filmmaking. I think that's the best way of putting it. And then eventually
Lots of
after that, I decided to move. I decided to move to where there was more of an economy and people, and try to make films there.
Well, I imagine that, I mean, you clearly have an eye and ear for stories, and in many ways, it doesn't matter where you live because you can find those stories anywhere. So go live in a place where you can thrive, right?
Totally, totally.
Tell me about the latest story you're working on, or you have out now, the your latest film.
Yeah. So I made this film. I started making a film 2 years ago. It's not like it's I don't know, how do I frame this? So I started making a film 2 years ago about a man with ALS who, it was presented to me as, you should do a story about this guy by a colleague, somebody I'd worked in, I think, making marketing films, and he worked at her company. She said, this guy's really amazing. Um, he's our receptionist, but I think he's had a really interesting life, and he has ALS, but he has the most incredible outlook on things. Would you want to meet him? And it's this. I toggle back and forth between films that I make for me and films that seem to kind of present themselves to me, which are not something that maybe I would necessarily be working on, but they seem interesting enough, and maybe something could come from a partnership, basically. So I said to her, look, if you want to produce this, let me just dispel the myth right now. Producers do not, materialize out of thin air. What it takes to produce a film is you got to find money and you got to be willing to manage the process. I said, and I don't have that in me for this, but if you do, be my producer. So she was willing to wear that hat. And I met the subject, whose name is Eric Gerardo Diaz, and he lives in East Hartford, Connecticut, and he is a very magical person. I think that's like the best way of putting it. He's almost like a little bit puckish. He's a gay man with 3 kids through adoption. He is an Army veteran. He actually came out during Don't Ask, Don't Tell to his captain because he wanted to be discharged from the Army. He was in basic training and he didn't want to be in the Army anymore. So he came out, and his captain came out right back to him. It was like, look, if I can do it, you can do it. Just shut up and stay here. And then he went on to love, and fortunately it was a time of peace. He went on to love military service. He's a very proud veteran, and he actually went on to become something of a drag star in a small town gay scene in Oklahoma. He became Miss Gay Oklahoma in the late '80s. So he's had a very unusual life, I guess is the best way of putting it.
Yeah.
And so he finds himself with this life-threatening disease. It's a life-ending disease. It's a progressive illness. There's no cure. And he decides to take up skydiving. And I just thought, this is a small film. I'm in between things. I can do this. And it actually, like every film, it wound up sort of dominating my life. And it's been a tremendously rewarding experience. The producer who's on the film, and I rarely work with a producer from the beginning, and I've realized I really should. She's been an amazing partner. Eric, the subject, is a remarkable human being. I love making films about people who are not celebrities, which is why I'm not, probably my films have not been better seen at this point, because filmmaking, like anything else, even if it's independent documentary, if the subject isn't in the zeitgeist, it's really hard to get eyeballs on it. But I really
Hmm.
think, like, and this is something that I think I learned in Utica, New York, which was that everyday people have integrity. They have hopes and dreams. They have successes and failures. Telling their stories with dignity speaks to all of our stories, essentially. I mean, I am really telling my own story over and over and over again. It's, I take someone else's story, but I filter it through my own experience. I
Hmm.
try to dig deep into, what my experience has been, and and find the thing that I have in common with the stranger and express it the way I know how. I mean, that's the hand of the director,
Hmm.
is to dig into their own experience and bring something out that's real, that's true. And so, I'm not gay, I'm not a military veteran, and I don't have ALS, but
And
I
you're not a drag
no, I never
champion.
was a drag superstar, although, who knows? I'm not, got some years left to try new things. But I know enough about living and dying. I've been on this earth 43 years. We've all had our share, of experiences. Like I learned I've gotten better with not using the camera as a shield. I've learned to, you know, have that camera be a way of opening my heart even farther if I can, and doing it in a way that I can bring others along for that experience. I mean, that is the magic of making a story and sharing it with other people, for sure.
So let's get this thing seen. How can people see it? How can people help it get seen?
Oh
What's
yeah,
the plan
well,
for this?
okay, that's a great question. We don't have a good answer for it because the quarantine has totally disturbed, what was, something of a strategy for getting it seen. But if you wanted to go to facebook.com, that's a very popular website these days, and visit our Facebook page, which is A Spirit in Flight Movie. That's a lot of words, I'm realizing now. A Spirit in Flight Movie. Or you can go to my website, which is dgfilmworks, dgfilmworks.com. There's a link to it there. We don't have it. So it's a short film. It's 13 minutes. So it's its own thing. And what we've decided to do, because so many film festivals are canceled now, and our premiere, we had a premiere. We had just been notified about our premiere at a really good film festival. We've been just sort of expediting this idea of cultivating an audience online and sharing the film in small groups with, virtual screenings, which we're going to start workshopping shortly. We have a rehearsal tonight, actually. If we can kind of replicate the event experience, the festival experience, the specialness of a film being new, because films are only new once, so I'm trying to do my best to, like, preserve the event experience, the newness of it, the excitement that we think we can generate within a variety of communities. We think there's lots of different audiences online that are going to see his strength and courage, as a human being, and say, I want to see a story about that. Whether that's
Mm.
people, who have created unconventional families, or, military veterans who have unconventional paths, following, their service. So, we're just trying to figure out, where those people congregate online, and, get them to invite us to do a screening. And being that it's a 13-minute film, it's actually way more possible, I think, to bring people together than it would be if it was a feature. Because it's hard to ask people to watch a feature, um, you know, online in some sort of virtual experience. But a 13-minute film, you can show the film, and you can have a conversation around the film and take audience questions, and do some, like, breakout chat room stuff on Zoom where people get to connect with the filmmaker and get to connect with the subject, and it makes it a rewarding experience, I think. I mean, I'll let you know after we do the rehearsal.
I've seen the trailer. I'm all in. So you tell me you got an audience of one for sure.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. I'll keep you posted for
All
sure.
right.
Yeah.
So the one thing I ask folks at the end of each episode, to true to the name of the show, had I known, if you could go back and talk to the kid creating a TV show on campus, and walking on the campus for the first time, had you known then what you know now, what would you have done differently or told yourself?
Mm. Yeah, it's good. It's a great question. It comes to mind very quickly, so it must be the most important thing. is just I would have told that younger self of mine that there were way more allies at hand than I thought there were.
Hmm.
It's not to say that I saw the world oppositionally. I just didn't know how to trust people. And I didn't know how to open myself up and be vulnerable. And I honestly just didn't know how to make a friend. And I think I had lots of people who I was friendly with. I had very few people who I was really close with. And I think if I could have told myself that there wasn't a downside um, to just letting myself be me and to being vulnerable, I think I would have enjoyed a lot more exchange with people when I was on the Hill.
Well, listen, man, you had a friend in me. You didn't know it, and you certainly have one even more so now. Realizing through
Thanks,
this
man.
conversation how similar our experiences were.
Oh, it's incredible to
Um,
me. It really is
I
incredible.
I admired you probably too much from afar, and didn't tell you at the time how much I admired what you were doing and how
Oh,
you
I
were
felt it. I think I
progressing through.
felt it.
So
I always
good.
felt such warmth and generosity from you. I wish, I wish I had the confidence to say back then what I said to you, a few minutes ago. I wish
Yeah.
I could have just, that would have felt very scary because real like vulnerability and feelings, that all felt so scary to me. I just think, what I could have done differently was I could have gotten out of my own way
Right.
and created more bridges to, awesome people that I wish I had known even better.
Oh, what a great conversation that was. Really enjoyed my time with David Gaynes. It was great to reconnect and really strengthen a friendship and in many ways make a new friendship. So I was happy to have that opportunity and not something I expected to happen as I started the show. Be sure to check out David Gaynes' work at dgfilmworks.com. Again, that's dgfilmworks.com. And check out his new film, A Spirit in Flight, on Facebook. It's A Spirit in Flight Movie. Go to facebook.com and search A Spirit in Flight Movie. And while we're doing the social thing, come check us out on Twitter at Had I Known Show. Again, on Twitter at Had I Known Show for previous episodes of this show as well as information on upcoming shows. And that's where you can let us know what you think, who you want me to talk to next, and what topics you want to hear covered. As always, my thanks to Dr. Michael Woods for supplying the music on the show. I think now more than ever we need some medicine from the doctor. So we'll let Doc play us out, and we'll talk to you next week.